Good afternoon, reading room. We are here to continue on day 99 of the classroom, and we are reading our story. So we're just going to get right into it. The Wondrous Life of Oscar. I think it's wow. I think it's kind of wow. Wow. So, Abelard, hold on one sec. One of those gnats. It's actually not. I'm blaming everything on the gnats. Trying to spread the plague. And so Abelard had some good fortune. You mean God? His wife pressed. I mean someone, Abelard said darkly. And so, for the next 3 months, Abelard waited for his name to start appearing in the Foro Popular section of the paper, thinly veiled criticisms aimed at a certain bone doctor from La Vega, which was often how the regime began the destruction of a respected citizen such as him, with disses about the way your socks and your shirts didn't match, waited for a letter to arrive demanding a private meeting with the Jefe, waited for his daughter to turn up missing on her trip back to school, lost nearly 20 pounds during his awful vigil, began to drink copiously, nearly killed a patient with a slip of the hand. If his wife hadn't spotted the damage before they stitched, who knows what might have happened. Screamed at his daughters and his wife almost every day. Could not get it up much for his mistress. But the rain season turned to hot season, and the clinic filled with the hapless, the wounded, the afflicted, and when after 4 months nothing happened, Abelard almost let out a sigh of relief. Maybe he wrote on the back of his hairy hand. Maybe. Santo Domingo Confidential. That's what it said. Santo Domingo Confidential. In some ways, living in Santo Domingo during the Trujillito was a lot like being in the famous Twilight Zone episode that Oscar loved so much. The one where the monstrous white kid with the godlike powers rules over a town that is completely isolated from the rest of the world, a town called Peaksville. The white kid is vicious and random, and all the people in the community live in a straight terror of him, denouncing and betraying each other at the drop of a hat in order not to be the person he maims, or more ominously, sends to the corn. After each atrocity he commits, whether it's giving a gopher 3 heads or banishing a no longer interesting playmate to the corn, or raining snow down on the last crops, the horrified people of Peaksville have to say, "It was a good thing you did, Anthony, a good thing." Between 1930, when the failed cattle thief seized power, and 1961, the year he got blazed, Santo Domingo was the Caribbean's very own Peaksville, with Trujillo playing the part of Anthony and the rest of us reprising the role of the man who got turned into Jack-in-the-Box. You might roll your eyes at the comparison, but friends, it would be hard to exaggerate the power Trujillo exerted over Dominican people and the shadow of fear he cast throughout the region. Homeboy dominated Santo Domingo like it was his very own private Mordor. There's a footnote on that. It's at the end of the page, and there's a comma there, so I'll read the footnote right there. Anthony may have isolated Peaksville with the power of his mind, but Trujillo did the same with the power of his office. Almost as soon as he grabbed the presidency, the failed cattle thief sealed the country away from the rest of the world, a forced isolation that we'll call the Plantano Curtain. For as the country's historically fluid border with Haiti, which was more Baca than border, the failed cattle thief became like Dr. Gull in From Hell, adopting the creed of the Dionysian architects. He aspired to become an architect of history, and through a horrifying ritual of silence and blood, machete and perihil, darkness and denial, inflicted a true border on the countries, a border that existed beyond maps, that is carved directly into the histories and imaginaries of a people. By the middle of the Teos second decade in office, the Plantano Curtain had been so successful that when the Allies won World War II, the majority of the Pueblo didn't even have the remotest idea that it had happened. Those who did know believed the propaganda that Trujillo had played an important role in the overthrow of the Japanese and the Hun. Must be Attila the Hun. Homeboy could not have had a more private realm had he thrown a force field around the island. After all, who needs futuristic generators when you have the power of the machete? Most people argue that El Jefe was trying to keep the world out. Some, however, point out that he seemed equally intent on keeping something in. Okay, all right, next one. So, Homeboy dominated Santo Domingo like it was his very own private Mordor. Not only did he lock the country away from the rest of the world, isolated it behind the Plantano Curtain, he acted like it was his very own plantation, acted like he owned everything and everyone, killed whomever he wanted to kill, sons, brothers, fathers, mothers, took women away from their husbands on their wedding nights, and then would brag publicly about the great honeymoon he'd had the night before. His eye was everywhere. He had a secret police that Stasi'd the Stasi that kept watch on everyone, even those everyone who lived in the States. Even those everyones who lived in the States. A security apparatus so ridiculously mongoose that you could say a bad thing about El Jefe at 8:40 in the morning, and before the clock struck 10, you'd be in the Quarenta having a cattle prod shoved up your ass. Who says that we third world people are inefficient? It wasn't just Mr. Friday the 13th you had to worry about either. It was the whole Chivato nation he helped spawn. For like every dark lord with his shadow, he had the devotion of his people. All right, so here's another footnote. Footnote 28. So devoted was the Pueblo, in fact, that Galindez recounts in La Era del Trujillo, when a graduate student was asked by a panel of examiners to discuss the pre-Columbian culture in the Americas, he replied without hesitation that the most important pre-Columbian culture in the Americas was the Dominican Republic during the era of Trujillo. Oh man, but what's more hilarious is that the examiners refused to fail the student on the grounds that he had mentioned El Jefe. It was widely believed that at any one time, between 42 and 87% of the Dominican population was on the secret police's payroll. Your own fucking neighbors could acabar con you just because you had something they coveted or because you cut in front of them at the colmado. Mad folks went out in that manner, betrayed by those they considered their panas, by members of their own families, by slips of the tongue. One day you were a law-abiding citizen cracking nuts on your galleria. The next day you were in the Quarenta, getting your nuts cracked, shit was so tight that many people actually believed that Trujillo had supernatural powers. It was whispered that he did not sleep, did not sweat, that he could see, smell, feel events hundreds of miles away, that he was protected by the most evil Fuku on the island. You wonder why 2 generations later our parents are still so damn secretive, why you'll find out your brother ain't your brother only by accident. Yeah, sounds like there's Dominican all around me. But let's not go completely overboard. Trujillo was certainly formidable, and the regime was like a Caribbean Mordor in many ways. But there were plenty of people who despised El Jefe, who communicated in less than veiled ways their contempt, who resisted. But Abelard was simply not one of them. Homeboy wasn't like his Mexican colleagues who were always keeping up with what was happening elsewhere in the world, who believed that change was possible. He didn't dream of revolution, didn't care that Trotsky had lived and died 10 blocks from his student pension in Coyoacan, wanted only to tend his wealthy ailing patients and afterward return to his study without worrying about being shot in the head or thrown to the sharks. Every now and then one of his acquaintances, usually Marcus, would describe for him the latest Trujillo atrocity. An affluent clan stripped of its properties and sent into exile. An entire family fed piece by piece to the sharks because a son had dared compare Trujillo to Adolf Hitler before a terrified audience of his peers. A suspicious assassination in Baneo of a well-known unionist. Abelard listened to these horrors tensely and then, after an awkward silence, would change the subject. He simply didn't wish to dwell on the fates of unfortunate people, on the goings-on in Peaksville. He didn't want those stories in his house. The way Abelard saw it, his Trujillo philosophy, if you will, he only had to keep his head down, his mouth shut, his pockets open, his daughters hidden for another decade or two. By then, he prophesied Trujillo would be dead and the Dominican Republic would be a true democracy. Abelard, it turns out, needed help in the prophecy department. Santo Domingo never became a democracy. He didn't have no couple of decades either. His luck ran out earlier than anyone expected. The bad thing, 1945 should have been a capital year for Abelard and family. 1945 should have been a capital year for Abelard and family. 2 of Abelard's articles were published to minor acclaim, one in the prestigious blank blank, and the second in a small journal out of Caracas, and he received complimentary responses from a couple of continental doctors. Very flattering indeed. They literally do have blank blanks there, right? So they do have blanks often throughout this. Names are blanked, whatever. Business in the supermercados couldn't have been better. The island was still flush from the war boom, and his managers couldn't keep anything on the shelves. The fincas were producing and reaping profits. The worldwide collapse of agricultural prices was still years off. Abelard had a full load of clients, performed a number of tricky surgeries with impeccable skill. His daughters were prospering. Jacqueline had been accepted at a prestigious boarding school in Le Havre, probably, to begin the following year, her chance to escape. His wife and mistress were pouring on the adoration. Even the servants seemed content, not that he ever really spoke to them. All in all, the good doctor should have been immensely satisfied with himself, should have ended each day with his feet up, un cigarro in the corner of his mouth, and a broad grin creasing his ursine features. It was, dare we say it, a good life, except it wasn't. In February, there was another presidential event for Independence Day, and this time the invitation was explicit for Dr. Abelard Louis Cabral and wife and daughter Jacqueline. The daughter Jacqueline part had been underlined by the party's host, not once, not twice, but 3 times. Abelard nearly fainted when he saw the damn thing, slumped back at his desk, his heart pushing up against his esophagus, stared at the vellum square for almost a whole hour before folding it and placing it inside his shirt pocket. For sure. For sure. The next morning, he visited the host, one of his neighbors. The man was out in his corral, staring balefully as some of his servants were trying to get one of his stallions to stud. When he saw Abelard, his face darkened. "What the hell do you want from me?" The order came straight from the Palacio. When Abelard walked back to his car, he tried not to show that he was shaking. Once again, he consulted with Marcus and Lydia. He said nothing of the invitation to his wife, not wanting to panic her, and by extension his daughter, not wanting even to say the words in his own house. Where the last time he'd been somewhat rational, this go around he was fuera de serie. Serie. S-E-R-I-E. Raved like a madman, waxed indignant to Marcus for nearly an hour about the injustice, about the hopelessness of it all, an amazing amount of circumlocution, because he never once directly named who it was he was complaining about, alternated between impotent rage and pathetic self-pity. In the end, his friend had to cover the good doctor's mouth to get a word in edgewise, but Abelard kept talking. "It's madness, sheer madness. I'm the father of my household. I'm the one who says what goes." "What can you do?" Marcus said with no little fatalism. "Trujillo's the president, and you're just a doctor. If he wants your daughter at the party, you can do nothing but obey. But this isn't human. When has this country ever been human, Abelard? You're the historian. You of all people should know that." Lydia was even less compassionate. She read the invite and swore a coño under her breath, and then she turned on him. "I warned you, Abelard. Didn't I tell you to send your daughter abroad while you had the chance? She could have been with my family in Cuba safe and sound. But now you're jodido. Now he has his eye on you." I know, Lydia, but what should I do?" "Jesu Cristo, Abelard," she said tremulously. "What options are there? This is Trujillo you're talking about." Back home, the portrait of Trujillo, which every good citizen had hanging in his house, beamed down on him with insipid, viperous benevolence. Maybe if the doctor had immediately grabbed his daughters and his wife and smuggled them all aboard a boat in Puerto Plata, or if he'd stolen with them across the border into Haiti, they might have had a chance. The Platano curtain was strong, but it wasn't that strong. But alas, instead of making his move, Abelard fretted and temporized and despaired. He couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, paced the halls of their house all night long, and all the weight he regained these last months he immediately lost. If you think about it, maybe he should have heeded his daughter's philosophy. Tarde venient Tibus asa. Every chance he got, he spent with his daughters. Jackie, who was her parents' golden child, who already had memorized all the streets in French Quarter, who that year alone had been the object of not 4, not 5, but 12 marriage proposals, all communicated to Abelard and his wife, of course. Jackie knowing nothing about it, but still. And Astrid, 10 years old, who took more after their father in looks and nature, plainer, the jokester, the believer who played the meanest piano and all of the cibao, and who was her big sister's ally in all things. The sisters wondered about their father's sudden attentiveness. "Are you on vacation, Papi?" He shook his head sadly. "No, I just like spending time with you is all." "What's the matter with you?" his wife demanded, but he refused to speak to her. "Let me be, mujer." Let me, I get it. My nose has a tickle, so hold on just a minute. I don't feel like stopping yet, so hold on. And we're not at a breaking point either. So things got so bad with him that he even went to church, a first for Abelard, which might have been a really bad idea since everybody knew the church at the time was in Trujillo's pocket. He attended confession almost every day and talked to the priest, but he got nothing out of it except to pray and to hope and to light some fucking stupid candles. He was going through 3 bottles of whiskey a day. His friends in Mexico would have grabbed their rifles and taken to the interior. At least that's what he thought they would have done. But he was his father's son in more ways than he cared to admit. His father, an educated man who had resisted sending his son to Mexico, but who had always played ball with Trujillo. When in 1937, the army had started murdering all the Haitians, his father had allowed them to use his horses, and when he didn't get any of them back, he didn't say nothing to Trujillo, just chalked it up as the cost of doing business. Abelard kept drinking and kept fretting, stopped seeing Lydia, isolated himself in his study, and eventually convinced himself that nothing would happen. It was only a test. Told his wife and daughter to prepare for the party. Didn't mention it was a Trujillo party. Made it seem like nothing was amiss. Hated himself to his core for his mendacity. But what else could he have done? How about not pretend like it doesn't exist? Tarde venientibus asa. I wish I knew how to pronounce that better. Hold on. I have tickly nose and scratchy throat, and I'm not done reading because it's not a stop. And since we're not at a stop, I'm going to keep reading. Because it's really good. And I got a little flow going here. It probably would have gone off without a hitch, too, but Jackie was so excited. Since it was her first big party, who's surprised that it became something of an event for her? She went shopping for a dress with her mother, got her hair done at the salon, bought new shoes, and was even given a pair of pearl earrings by another of her female relatives. Socorro helped her daughter with every aspect of the preparation. No suspicions, but about a week before the party, she started having these terrible dreams. She was in her old town where she'd grown up before her aunt adopted her and put her in nursing school before she discovered she had the gift of healing. Staring down that dusty, fraggy panty lined road that everybody said led to the Capitol, and in the heat rippled distance she could see a man approaching, a distant figure who struck in her such dread that she woke up screaming. Abelard leaping out of bed in panic, the girls crying out in their rooms. Had the dream almost every damn night the final week, a countdown clock. On T-2, Lydia urged Abelard to leave with her on a steamer bound for Cuba. She knew the captain. He would hide them, swore it could be done. We'll get your daughter afterward, I promise. I can't do that, he said miserably. I can't leave my family. She returned to combing her hair. They said not another word. You know, that's just a coward, just like a deep-seated coward. I can't leave my family for the betterment of my family. Just a deep coward. If he's putting his daughter in danger, which it seems that he is. But I'm not done reading yet, so we'll see. On the afternoon of the party, as Abelard was dolefully tending to the car, he caught sight of his daughter in her dress, standing in the sala, hunched over another one of her French books, looking absolutely divine, absolutely young, and right then he had one of those epiphanies. Those epiphanies us lit majors are always forced to talk about. It didn't come in a burst of light or a new color or a sensation in his heart. He just knew he just couldn't do it. Told his wife to forget about it. Said same to daughter. Ignored their horrified protestations. jumped in the car, picked up Marcus, and headed to the party. What about Jacqueline? Marcus said. She's not coming. Marcus shook his head, said nothing else. At the reception line, Trujillo again paused before Abelard, sniffed the air like a cat. And your wife and daughter? Abelard, trembling, but holding it together somehow, already sensing how everything was going to change. My apologies, Your Excellency, that they could not attend. His porcine eyes narrowed. So I see, he said coldly, and then dismissed Abelard with a flick of his wrist. Not even Marcus would look at him. Chiste apocalyptus. I'm assuming chiste apocalyptus. So that's a place to stop. And I think that's what I'm going to do. But I'll be back here tomorrow. Tomorrow is day 100. And even though it is day 100, I'm going to be reading. I still want to read because no reason not to. No reason not to. Okay. This is Dr. Annette Feravich. Thank you so much for joining me here in the reading room where we are reading The Wondrous Life, the brief wondrous life of Oscar Wilde. I'm going to say, wow, wow, wow. That's what it is, wow. That's what it is, wow. As in Oscar Wilde, wow. So the brief, wondrous life of Oscar Wilde. Wow. Wow. I don't know. Yeah. I'll see you tomorrow. Thanks for joining me.